Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Wednesday, September 24th around here, and we got a lot of football to talk about. This upcoming weekend is absolutely incredible from top to bottom. We have two matchups that might be some of the best matchups we'll see the entirety of the season, and a couple others that frankly would have been the best matchup of the week if the first two were not on here. So we got a lot to get to. The best way I thought to break it up was we're going to start in the Big Ten. There's a massive matchup between Oregon and Penn State in the Big Ten. There's USC-Illinois and a couple other games I want to get to. Figured I would just kind of compartmentalize that conference into the first segment, and then we'll do the same thing with the SEC. Obviously, Alabama, Georgia is going to take the cake there. We have Ole Miss, LSU also to break down, and a couple more ones that might be a little bit of an upset alert that we'll talk about in that one. Then we got to whip around. We got Arkansas playing Notre Dame this upcoming weekend. We got TCU, Arizona State, a number of huge games coming up, especially on Friday. Two huge ones that we'll talk about here in the third segment, and then we'll finish it off with a little bit of a headline catch-up. Usually something we wait until Friday to do, but a lot of stuff has happened. We've had coach firings, we've had big-time injuries that have popped up that will totally change the college football landscape, and a couple of little ancillary things with these conferences that I want to get into towards the end of the show. But let's jump into this thing, because we got games to talk about, and some of the best games that you will see the entirety of the season. This is probably the best weekend slate we're going to have the entirety of the way. Obviously, there are going to be some great ones after this, but this is a really special slate, and we'll start with maybe the most special game on it, depending on who you're talking to, of course. Oregon goes on the road to Penn State, number 6 against number 3. Penn State favored by 3.5 in this game. Probably would be roughly a pick 'em on a neutral field. Over-under at 52.5. This one's a night kickoff. This one's a whiteout. It's as good as it possibly gets. Oregon's been playing incredibly clean football, probably as clean as just about anyone in the entire country. Penn State, not so much. They've played some layups. They've gotten their footing, but it hasn't looked all that pretty offensively. The offensive line's been a little bit out of sorts, which seemed to be an incredible unit coming into the season. Obviously, they were holding a little bit back, you would have to assume, for this game, but they're going to have to turn it up a notch. There's no two ways about that. If they don't find a way to get a big-time win here, there's some questions around James Franklin, and there are some stats that might be a little bit troubling depending on who you're talking to. Oregon obviously beat Penn State in the Big Ten Championship last year. James Franklin is 2-20 against top 6 AP teams. Lost 14 straight against those top teams. So it is a very real problem. There's no two ways about that. Penn State, however, is 9-6 in whiteout games. They've won 4 straight. So maybe that evens out the scales just a little bit. That is going to be an incredible atmosphere. That's one thing I can tell you with absolute certainty, and it's something we'll talk about here in a second, but that place is special. It is probably the best atmosphere in all of college football whenever that whiteout happens with the right team, of course. That's always been kind of a little bit of a sore spot for some of the Penn State fans, but you got the right team, and you got the right moment, and you got to be able to deliver. A couple of players to watch. Jaden Lamar over at Oregon, the running back has been a huge player for them. If Oregon's going to put this game on Dante Moore's shoulders, it is going to be a lot for that kid to handle. It is a very good defense. Jim Knowles did a great job the second time around against Oregon last year, and you're going to have to deal with a lot. So they're going to need a run game. They've been able to do it thus far, but Mekhi Hughes needs to step up. Jaden Lamar needs to step up. All these running backs need to play a big-time role in this game for Oregon if they're going to find a way to win on the road. That kind of plays into the matchup of the game. I think the Oregon offensive line against the Penn State defensive line will decide this game, whether it's in the run game or the pass game. You have Chaz Coleman, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, Zariah Fisher all on that other side for Penn State. They are going to be nightmares to deal with, plain and simple. Now, you won't have to deal with that guy on the screen, Abdul Carter, which has to make you feel a little bit better, but these guys are really talented. They have all the ability in the world to totally break up this game, especially in the run game. I really do think that's kind of the key to the game from the Oregon side of the ball. If you can't run the football in this game, it is going to be really hard to find openings against this team. You're probably going to have an A.J. Harris, DeCorian Moore matchup that is very much good on good, but one player is I believe, senior at this point in A.J. Harris. One is a true freshman going into his first real intense road start. It's going to be a lot for that kid to handle, and he's going to have to make plays in this game. But the reality is, Oregon has to fall back on the run game at some point in this game. If Penn State can cause havoc up front, I don't think Oregon's offense is going to be able to run at the efficient rate they've been able to through a couple of weeks. So, going to be really fun to watch all of that unfold. I think when you look at these two teams, there's so much on the table for what they can do this season. Not to say that anything is off the table with a loss for one of these teams here. Obviously, both these teams are firmly in the mix for the CFP going forward, regardless of what happens. But I don't think I need to tell Penn State fans what this one means to them. I don't think I have to explain that this one's going to be a massive, massive game for how people view James Franklin. And frankly, if you lose this one, I have no confidence you going to Columbus to win one. I have no confidence you going to a Big Ten championship and winning one. And I have no confidence of you going into a playoff and winning one of these big games. They got to find a way to get this one done. But some keys to the matchup. Big game Drew Allar's not been a good player, plain and simple. He'd probably be the first person to tell you that. Against ranked opponents in his career, 56% completion, 157 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT on average. He needs to step up. There's better pieces around you. The offensive line, although shaky early in the season, is a very veteran and good group. You have to find a way to make plays. And it really does come down to him. I understand the players around him needed to play a lot better in seasons past and in this game upcoming. They have to play better around him. But the reality of the matter is it is going to fall on 15 shoulders at some point to make a massive throw in this football game. He hasn't been able to make it in the past, and he has to make it in this game if they're going to win it. And then the wide receivers for Penn State that they brought in, this is why they brought you in. For this game and the Ohio State game, they know they can beat just about everyone else on their schedule with what they had last year, with what they've had for the last number of years at the wide receiver position. You were brought in to win this game. You were brought in to win the Ohio State game and win playoff games down the road. So Trevor Pena has to be a factor. Kyron Hudson, almost especially Kyron Hudson, because of his length, because of his 50-50 ball ability, I think he's going to be a huge piece. Devontae Ross has to be a piece. The tight ends that they use so greatly, they have to find a way to get this passing offense going because while you should be able to run the ball on Oregon, they're, I believe, 50th in the country when it comes to run defense. You should be able to get the run going just a little bit. The reality of the matter is at some point, one of those wide receivers or tight ends or Drew Allar is going to have to make a big-time play through the air. Can they do it, and can they do it in the right moment in this game? And then the whiteout. It is going to be a factor. This is a very, very real thing. It's something that I think a lot of people outside the Big Ten and people that don't pay attention to Penn State football really don't respect to the level that they should. When Oregon walks in there, they're going to see something they have never seen in their lives. And especially Dante Moore is going to walk into an environment that is unlike anything he's ever seen, unlike anything a lot of players have ever seen, because you're going into State College with one of the most rabid fan bases in the country that is so deprived for this win in a whiteout at night. It is perfect. It is an absolute perfect storm for Penn State having an environment that is second to none. On Saturday and probably for the rest of the season, this place should be off the charts incredible, and I'm doing it. I'm going to fall on the sword. I'm going to say Penn State's going to win this football game. It is a thing that I've gone back and forth on. I thought about doing the thing where I was like, just prove it to me. Prove to me that you can win and pick Oregon. I can't do it. I think Penn State has it. I think the desperation is big enough. I think Drew Allar has that chip on his shoulder just enough. I think they're going to be able to run the ball just enough. All of it is margins. All of it is the very, very small margins in this football game, but I'm going to take Penn State to finally win one of these football games and look forward to a game in Columbus that could very well be number 1 against number 2 for a massive, massive spot in the CFP. USC goes on the road to Illinois, Number 21 against number 23 here. USC actually favored by 6.5 on the road. The over-under at 60.5. This one kicks off at noon, so get a good start to the day with this one. It's going to be a really fun one. Both these quarterbacks kind of having different seasons in a lot of different ways. Luke Altmaier started the season really well, was playing some good football in the Duke game, played okay, didn't necessarily play his level of football, and then last week, obviously, everything went wrong in that offense. So that was definitely something that was somewhat beyond his control, but he didn't play his best football by any means. Jaden Mayav is playing as good as football as anyone in the entire country, especially at the quarterback position. He, I believe, leads the country in passing yards still. Very, very talented kid, kind of a pseudo Caleb Williams, not quite the level of talent that Caleb Williams had, but he can make a lot of those similar plays, and it definitely does open up this USC offense. We talked about it. Maybe they got to score 40 or 35 points to win just about every game, but at the end of the day, I think they very well could with the group that they have. And speaking of that, the USC wide receivers against the Illinois secondary will probably decide this game. There were a number of moments against Indiana where just looked like the Illinois secondary wasn't ready. And it's not to say, Elijah Surratt, incredibly tough cover. All of those guys. Omar Cooper, a remarkably hard guy to get around. But you're going to have Mekhi Lemon on the other side. And you probably won't have Jacoby Lane, which is a big-time win because that guy would be an absolute nightmare for the secondary. But at the end of the day, you're going to have very, very good players and very fast and very twitchy players at the wide receiver position for USC in this game. Jaden Mayav can do exactly what Fernando Mendoza in Indiana did to you. So you're going to have to be very careful against this group, whether it's playing a cover 3 or cover 4 shell to keep everything in front of you. I guess that would be fine. Not to say USC can't beat you that way, but at the very least you're avoiding the explosives, which is huge against this team. It's going to be a fight, and the Illinois secondary just has to step up to the plate in this game. The keys to the game, if the Illinois run game does not get going, it's going to be a long day at the office. I can almost promise you that. Not to say that the USC back end is going to totally tear apart the pass game for Illinois. It's just to say you got to slow this game down. You can't give USC a number of possessions, more possessions than you're going to have, because at the end of the day, they're going to end up scoring at some point. They're going to score quite a few times, if I'm being totally honest, if you speed this game up and you give them 10, 12, maybe 14 possessions in this football game. You're going to be playing from behind for a lot of it, and I don't think you're equipped to play from behind very often. So you're going to have to find a way to get that run game going. Fagan, Valentine, obviously in the Indiana game, it's obviously a little bit different because you're down so early, you're down by so much, you're going to pass the ball, but they got to find a way to run the ball in this football game, or it's going to be a pretty long day for Illinois. I think they should be able to run the football, but at the end of the day, if they can't, it's going to be really tough to beat this USC team, who gets off to a quick start. I think both these teams want to play from in front, particularly Illinois, because USC a little bit more equipped to play from behind with the way that they attack down the field. But at the end of the day, when you're playing from behind, you tend to be inclined to take maybe one too many mistakes or make it a throw that's into too tight of a window, and then Illinois can make a big play and take it the other direction. So it's one of those things where one of these teams I tend to believe is going to press. Whichever team is down, I tend to believe is just going to press just a little bit too much at some point in this football game, and the other team's going to take advantage. Probably going to be the team that's losing early on. So can Illinois get up 10-0, 14-0, and kind of force Jaden Mayav off his hands to make some plays downfield that could very well go awry? Or can USC jump out to a 14-point lead, and then Illinois is trying to figure out how can we pull this off when last week it went the entire opposite direction for us when we were put in this position? And then finally, USC's had some interesting schedule travel dynamics over the last little bit. USC went to Purdue 2 weeks ago, came back to LA to play Michigan State last week in a late night game, and then they go back to the Midwest to play Illinois in a tough environment against a team that very badly needs it. It's a tall order to get that to work. At the end of the day, when I look at this game, I tried to figure out which way I really, really think it's going to go. I think the USC offense is too much. I think if you're going to give up 63 points to that Indiana offense, the USC offense is going to be able to do some really great things against you. I do think it's closer. I have it 34-30 in favor of USC, but at the end of the day, I think that USC offense, I think Jaden Mayav is a little too much, and we come out of it thinking this USC team could very well be that fourth team in the Big Ten that makes that run to the CFP. Ohio State goes on the road to Washington this weekend. It's one that I think Ohio State fans are a little bit worried about. I've seen some talk around the Twitter space that this is not a game that they feel very, very, very confident about, at the very least the way they would usually feel confident about one of these types of games. This line has plummeted. I believe it started at minus 12.5, if I'm not mistaken, for Ohio State, got all the way down to 7.5, is now back up to 8.5 in favor of Ohio State, but over-under set at 51.5. This one's really, really fun. These are two of my favorite quarterbacks in the entire country, and two very different quarterbacks. Julian Sayin, that pure pocket passer, probably one of the more gifted passers of the football in college football, frankly. And then you got Damon Williams, one of the better athletes you're going to find at the quarterback position. Very slippery, kind of has that Johnny Manziel a little bit about him, where he just gets out of whatever pocket you put him in, and he finds a way to make the play downfield. Very talented kid, and they're still kind of looking for that big-time win. They were able to beat Michigan last year, but didn't prove to be the win that they wanted it to be. This would obviously be the win that they want it to be. So Damon Williams can totally change this game. The Ohio State defense does such a good job of playing on the front foot, of keeping guys in their pocket, of keeping guys from making plays with their legs. They did it against Arch Manning. They've done it in the past against a number of really good rushing quarterbacks. Having Caleb Downs makes that a whole lot easier. I can promise you that. I can imagine Caleb Downs will be roving the middle for the vast majority of this football game, waiting for Damon Williams to leave the pocket to try to make a play with his legs, and then Jonah Williams, a guy that you can absolutely lean on at the running back position, probably a top 5 running back in the country right about now, and is playing some great football. If they can find a way to get this run game going early and slow down the Ohio State offense and kind of get the Ohio State defense just a little bit confused, a little bit on their heels with, the quarterback read or a couple of just eye discipline type plays to keep the Ohio State defense on their heels early, I think it could get really, really interesting. For Julian Sayin, this is a massive one. This is the first time he's going on the road in his career, and in the Texas game, they protected them just a little bit for good reason. When you have someone struggling like Arch Manning did in that game, no reason to put your quarterback in bad positions. Since then, he's been ripping the ball around. He's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the entire country. He's going to have to make plays in this football game, and it is going to be a stout order. There is a lot of really, really good players on that Washington team. The defense has left a little bit to be desired early on in the season, but still a very, very good group up there. And I think at the end of the day, this is going to be the moment where Julian Sayin has to step up and become the player that he is very capable of being, become the leader of this Ohio State football team. He's going to have to make a couple of big-time throws in this game. It's a huge one for Ohio State and Washington. Ohio State still has Illinois, Penn State, and Michigan on the schedule, so dropping this one puts you in a little bit of a precarious spot moving forward. Washington gets Michigan, Illinois, and Oregon, so they're in a position where they win this one, they're in a really good shape going forward because you can win maybe one of that Michigan, Illinois, Oregon type games and be able to get into the CFP. Kind of the same thing for Ohio State, but at the end of the day, I think we all understand that Ohio State's probably getting in this thing even if they lose this one. I think it's going to be close. I think they're going to battle down to the absolute wire. I just think Ohio State makes one too many plays. I think Ohio State wins this one 31-27. I think when you look back on this one, you're thinking, this Washington team's a whole lot more dangerous than I thought they were going to be. I don't know what that means for the CFP with them going forward. I know for a fact that teams like Michigan, Illinois, and Oregon that come in there wanting to go to the CFP have to be very, very careful with the Huskies. Indiana goes on the road to Iowa after a huge game, and this is absolutely a trap spot. Iowa plays really solid football. Obviously, the offense leaves a little bit to be desired, although they put together a pretty nice performance against Rutgers. They've kind of started to find a little bit of a groove on that side of the ball. This will be a much taller order against this Indiana defense, of course, but at the end of the day, you're coming off an emotional win if you're Indiana. You dominate a team that a lot of people thought you were going to lose to, and now you walk into a team that's just going to do things correctly. They're going to run the football. They're going to keep the ball out of Fernando Mendoza's hands. They're probably not going to get a lot of penalties. They're going to play stout defense. This one's going to be at least relatively close at halftime. I don't think Indiana's going to run away with this game. If they do, you're going to see them bump up in my rankings quite a bit. But at the end of the day, I think it's one of those games where Iowa's starting to find it. I just think it's a bad matchup. I think you look at this one, you think that Indiana defensive line might just dominate this entire game, and I don't think they have the guys on the outside, does Iowa, to compete with D'Angelo Pons and all of the guys that Indiana has in the back end. I'm going to take Indiana to win this one, move forward to a game in Oregon after a bye week that is going to be downright massive for this football team, but I'll take Indiana to win 24-13 in over Iowa. Not necessarily going to be all that pretty, I think. I think it's going to be a slow start. Maybe Iowa, it's 6-3 Iowa at halftime or something like that, and then Indiana is able to put it together down the stretch and get a big-time win for them and move forward at looking for yet another CFP appearance under Curt Cignetti. It's a great weekend. There are so many great games, and that was just the Big Ten. I think we have 4 games there that could have everything to do with what the CFP looks like at the end of the day. If Oregon gets a big win, the anger around James Franklin will be very, very real. I can promise you that. If USC wins, then they're firmly in the mix for the CFP going forward. Same thing with Washington. If they pull a massive upset, And I think Ohio State fans are a little bit more nervous about this one than they want to be. But we'll talk about it all as it unfolds. We'll get into it a little bit more on Friday. But let's go ahead and take a break here. When we come back, let's turn our attention to the other major conference, the SEC. We got Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, and a couple other games that are going to be massive for the CFP race over there right after this. So stick with us.